Niles Mithran stepped off the free merchanteer unjustified bravado with the calm stride of a man who had been here before. But this time, he walked with more caution than usual. He couldn't help feeling there was something that made this trip feel different. He paused for a moment, heeding his gut and glancing around. Nothing jumped out to his finely honed survival instincts, but he refused to let his guard down. It's in the air, he thought, old instincts flaring to life. If you paid attention, you could tell when a fuse had been lit somewhere, and that instinct keened sharply today, despite the ordinary appearance of the bustle of merchants and the hiss of cargo loaders. He limbered up his neck and shoulders and proceeded into the chaos of the bustling station. He didn't know what it was yet, but he'd be ready when he did. Besides, fuse or not, he had business. Musati medium patrol cruiser Talanka Plimby was having a bad waking cycle. This was not unusual for Plimby. The Musati collective was a far-flung, star-faring merchant empire, one of the galaxy's most established, holding more than 500 worlds. Their relatively simple society, to which their leaders had long credited much of their success, consisted of a three-tier caste system: Ial-Laba, leaders; Miuse, citizens; and Ladan, untouchables. Because the inhabitants of the universe have a similar nature in many ways, some fortunate, some amusing, in this case awful, most Musati were Ladan. Plimby was not merely Ladan. His Muse foreman had once quipped that Plimby was about the most La that ever danned. Most Ladan were accepting of their status, courtesy of 10,000 years of habit. Those Ladan who openly rebelled were quickly put down. However, a very few were like Plimby, intelligent enough to chafe against their status as little more than slaves, but not brave enough to openly rebel. These Ladan lived fairly, miserable lives stuck between their yearning for freedom and their fear of reprisal. The untouchable slang word for these sorts was Klonoks, dreamers. It was usually said with a mixture of pity and contempt. Nobody envied a Klonoks. The rebels thought them cowards, and the obedient thought them fools. So it was because of his Klonoks nature that Plimby, most La that ever danned, had flexed some small degree of rebellion this waking cycle and was having quite a few regrets about the situation. It all started when Plimby learned that his home ship, the Musati medium patrol cruiser Talanka, was scheduled to dock at Satina Station in the next few days. Satina Station was one of only 4 primary hubs in known space. Hubs were strictly enforced neutral zones. Large stellar concordate fleets were permanently based here and would attack any warships that powered weapons or in any way took action against others. Under the guns of the Concordate Navy, all species could rely on the hubs for repair, refuel, and rest. But that wasn't what made them special. The hubs were truly gargantuan in scale, dozens of kilometers of ad hoc, built-as-needed station, in stable, well-charted space, capable of holding millions of beings while serving as the permanent home for millions more. These were sprawling, chaotic stations, and while they were disorganized and somewhat grimy, they were rarely ever dangerous, thanks to the strict concordate patrols both on station and off. As such, they were the most thriving cultural hubs in the galaxy. Hundreds of species had met, played, worked, and lived together aboard the beautifully messy stations. Plimby, of course, had known none of this, and was in fact not permitted to know any of it at all. He had learned it while perusing the Galactipedia, an ingenious encyclopedia which was accessible to all galactic citizens for free via the datanet and had apparently been translated into more than 13,000 languages. It had been his turn with a jury-rigged plasma flow monitor panel that the Ladan crew had jailbroken for entertainment vids and games. This was strictly prohibited, of course, because Ladan were not citizens, and by accessing Galactipedia, via the ship's datanet link, Plimby had been caught almost immediately. Using the monitor panel for games or vids would have resulted in a fairly minor punishment. This was a way in which Ladan were expected to act. But accessing not only educational content, but educational content meant for citizens was an offense far graver. After 2 days of savage beatings, both by his Muse foreman and his fellow Ladan, who were irritated at having lost their games and vids, Plimby was summoned by his foreman, Karoth. Trembling and bruised, Plimby waited to hear his fate which he naturally assumed to be a grisly execution or more beatings. Palimbi, the Clennox. He felt a rush of terror. "Oh yes, we know what you are. How absurd. You're not wild enough to be worth killing or reasonable enough to be happy. But don't worry, I know what you need." "What I need, sir?" Palimbi ventured tentatively. "Yes, indeed. We will need a new plasma flow monitor panel thanks to your adventures with the last one. This ship will dock aboard Satina Station in 5 hours. You will board the station, locate an electronics trade depot, purchase a new panel using the ship's credit chit, and return. And you will do so alone." Palimbi nearly lost consciousness. Alone? Ladon were never permitted to leave the ship alone. Ever. Not on the surface of alien worlds, not at basic service stations, and certainly not in the teeming chaos of one of the 4 primary hubs, not even to save their lives. Ladan off the homeworld were always accompanied by a muse who spoke for them. A Ladan by itself was nothing at all. Any Ladan having survived a disaster when it could have chosen to die alongside its muse was invariably put to death. A Ladan, truly alone and with autonomy, simply did not occur in Miuseti society. Karoth sneered, noticing Palimbi's trembling terror and the way his 4 hands, rough and well-worn hands like any Ladan's, their lime green, color darkened to forest green with calluses and scars, knotted together. "Yes, alone. What's the matter? You seemed so thrilled to learn about Satina Station, and here I am offering you a front-row seat." He chuckled unkindly. "Perhaps, when you return to the Talanka, you will be more appreciative of your place, Untouchable One. That is, if we don't leave without you." Dismissed from Karoth's quarters, Palimbi stumbled down the ship's central corridor, nearly overcome with dread, earning him a cuff on the back of the head from a Muse weapons officer who felt he was not moving with enough alacrity. When the ship arrived at Satina Station, he gathered his bag and the credit chit that Karoth had tossed him in the numb daze of a dead man walking, too full of dread to marvel at the first form of currency he had ever held in his hands. He left the ship for the first time in several years without really seeing where he was walking, taking in the horrified empathy in the gazes of Ladan crew members, the cruel amusement in the laughs of many, but not all, of the Miuse crew members, and the disinterested appraisal of the Ialaba executive officer. As the airlock cycled, Palimbi stepped aboard Satina Station, hardly able to move his feet, feeling a leaden ball of fear and uncertainty harden. Somewhere, though, in the ball of terror coalescing inside him, so deep that he didn't yet recognize it for what it was, an ember he had carried for all of his days, an ember that had earned him the derisive moniker Clennox, caught a burst of wind and began to smolder brighter. It was not strictly accurate to call the massive ring near the top of Satina Station the Mercantile Ring. The hub was primarily a trading location, and most sections of it contained shops of some variety. However, because the ring was the single largest gathering of shops and merchants on the hub, the informal name had been used so long that nobody remembered the correct one. It had been built 238 years prior by the very matter-of-fact Kandorian sect, a nearly emotionless people who only seemed to enjoy manufacturing heavy goods. The term was in fact access corridor, extra large, general purpose, circular. The ring was approximately 10 kilometers in diameter and nearly half a kilometer high. A small tram on an elevated platform ran the full length of the ring, with maps regularly accessible. To a denizen of Earth, the ring would have resembled a dazzlingly enormous multi-level shopping mall. However, Palimbi, who had spent most of his life aboard a 250-meter-long patrol cruiser, had no such place to compare to this experience. To him, the ring was a dazzling explosion of pure chaos, a cavern of countless teeming beings that could have swallowed his home ship without a second thought. Attempting to stay out of the way, he managed to continually do the exact opposite. An enormous avian creature squawked angrily and batted him out of the way with a wing. He murmured apologies, then yelped as he relaxed backward against a warm lizard of some sort, which also did not seem overly enthused. Taking a moment to collect himself, Palimbi had a realization that, even in his panicked state, took him aback. I don't know what any of these beings are. As a shipboard Ladan, his world had been the Talanka. He knew only his species, and two others. And both of those were species the Mu Ceti collective had engaged in warfare. The warlike Bryn, now shattered and rare in the light of the Stellar Concordate's successful war effort against them, and the wispy, ethereal Gostan, who were a common trading partner of the Mu Ceti following some initial first contact skirmishes. He only knew those because of shipboard combat drills in preparation for combat with the Bryn, and because of frequent encounters with Gostan while loading and unloading cargo. Even then, he knew next to nothing about their cultures, homes, dangers, or beliefs. Thankfully, language, at least, was a non-issue due to the universal language implant standardized among all spacefaring trade species thousands of years prior. He did technically know a third species, but he rolled his eyes at himself as it came to mind. He didn't believe in humans. He had heard the stories and had dismissed them as the sort of fantastic nonsense Ladan usually lapped up. Deadlier than a full squadron of Mu's nocturne guards, as clever as an Aal Laba thought, guide as humble and helpful as the lowliest domestic Ladan, he had snorted when he'd heard the stories. Yes, he was sure he'd meet a human as soon as he encountered flowing rivers of riches or food that was free. The universe Palimbi knew about was not interesting or kind enough to allow for such fantasies. He approached one of the holographic maps on the wall. Mu Ceti were average in size by galactic standards, most falling between 4 to 5 feet tall, with a moderate build. He chose to stand behind a diminutive pair of some sort of fuzzy, ball-shaped alien species that did not seem overly threatening, and perused the holographic board, which scanned his eyes and translated the points of interest into Mu Ceti common linguistics, his people's trade language, and opened up a smaller private holomap in front of him. This common galactic technology allowed a great many people to interface with a single screen. Most of this was gibberish to Palimbi. He gestured in the air, attempting to limit the search to parts 847 results. The map blinked at him. He deflated, then narrowed the search to ship parts 405 results. This wasn't getting him anywhere. He eventually settled on the closest one, rivets and stuff, still a decent walk away. As Palimbi began to walk toward rivets and stuff, a cheerful-looking alien manning a food cart waved at him emphatically. Oi, Mu Ceti, fried mancha! Best on the station, that's the Morbi's mancha guarantee. Palimbi's eyes drifted to the succulent and leafy-looking breaded plant on a stick displayed for sale and maintained in a heat field. His mouth watered. He had only eaten something like that a few times in his life, during the widespread victory celebrations following the defeat of the Bryn. The standard Ladan fare was a bland but nutritionally complete gruel. Ladan were permitted 2 bowls per meal, most rarely retrieved the second bowl. His fingers inched toward the credit chit Karoth had given him before he drew his fingers away in horror. If this had been the penalty for reading Galactipedia, what would the penalty be for stealing from a muse? This was clearly a test that he had almost failed. He shook his head briskly at the cheerful alien and hunched his shoulders, walking past. Okay, man, no hard feelings, Morbi shouted after him. As the small fuzzy green alien hurried away, Morbi felt his smile fall. Poor damn Ladan. The Mu Ceti were one of the only species left that practiced something like slavery, only permitted because their cultural caste system skirted the galactic anti-slavery statutes, and even then, only because most species heavily relied on Mu Ceti. Trade routes, that didn't make it right. Morbi considered chasing the little guy down and offering him a mancha on the house, but quickly shook off that impulse. This was business, after all, and when the ring was this busy, he was sure to sell out soon. Primary Hub, Satina Station. Recycling Facility ODRC 3-time check, approx. 8 hours, remote equipment check, standing by for 0 mark. Connection green, weapon check. Reassembly complete. Wraith 3x 3mm internally suppressed needle shrike with wrist mount and optical interface. Optical interface green. Weapon status green. Station status at 85% standard visitor capacity, 91% permanent capacity, 45% docking berth capacity, concordate garrison status. No alert detected. Primary hub, Satina Station, the contract exchange. Niles Mithran's high black leather boots clicked off the polished tile of the corridor as he made his way into the contract exchange. colloquially known as the CX. The large, bustling gallery full of offices and meeting spaces was actually a spare embassy. The hub had been built anticipating more first contacts than had occurred thus far, and several dozen vacant embassies had been otherwise repurposed. The key, CX was in a very roundabout fashion a jobs board. Corporate merchants, gig couriers, and free merchanteers gathered in the CX to inquire about available work and pick up pay for completed work. The hub itself staffed the CX with a wide variety of species from a wide variety of political and merchant entities combined with regular blind audits to ensure neutrality. The fairness of the work assignments and the pay for them was a core piece of the machinery of galactic civilization, and attempts at corruption were rare. All species relied on merchants and couriers, and rarely were any inclined to disrupt the system. For those that were, the severe criminal and civil penalties for being caught fixing a merchant contract were ample deterrents. Niles stepped up to the reception desk. The clerk today was Wren, a wryly sarcastic member of the delicately framed Relena species. To humans, Relena looked like plants come to life, with delicate plant growths coming out of their soft yet bark-like skin, an artifact of symbiotic evolution with the plants of their home planet. However, far from being ethereal, elevated creatures, as one might expect from a species so close to nature, the Relena personality was almost always down-to-earth and relatable. Humans and Relena, unsurprisingly, had extremely close diplomatic connections and tended to be fond of one another. In a galaxy of unknown motives, both species appreciated another that could be counted on to say what they meant. "Hey, Niles! Been a while. Have you gotten even more haggard? I hear sleep is good for that." I know. But I don't make creds when I sleep. You've got to take care of yourself, man. Wren shook her head. There aren't enough of you, humans around. I have to try and keep you intact. Niles reacted with faux-offended good humor. Hey, we're getting our numbers back up. At least I try to do my part. He grinned. Wren rolled her eyes but smiled. Earth Galactic Society's first contact with humanity, a little over 100 years before, was one of the most bitter and tragic tales in the history of the civilized galaxy. When humankind entered its third world, war, a concept still horrifying to most galactic denizens, let alone 3 of them, its population had swollen to 11.2 billion, and climate change had ravaged the heavily populated coastlines. Refugees in the hundreds of millions were further swollen by the countless small conflicts across the globe. Everyone had always assumed the Third World War would be because of some large incident, some significant move by a major nation-state. But it wasn't. Rather, it had been 1,000 small fires that coalesced until practically nowhere on Earth was free of violence and horror-spawned weaponry. Humanity had no way of knowing that the Stellar Concordat had been monitoring humanity for nearly half a century and had been nearing the decision to make first contact. When the SC diplomatic fleet departed for Earth, their information about the new planet was that it was a heavily overpopulated planet with unusually hostile conditions for most life that nonetheless was still beautiful and full of diverse life, housing 11.2 billion intelligent souls, 10,105. That was how many humans had remained alive when the SC fleet arrived around Sol. Confusion and disbelief had threaded throughout the fleet, believing it had arrived at the wrong planet. Instead of a teeming blue-green planet of 11.2 billion, the SC had arrived too, as the ship's computer dispassionately produced 310,105 humans on what looked like a ball of gray-white ash. Humanity, already on its last legs after a violent war that had wiped out most of it in a matter of months, received this final stab to the heart in utter disbelief. All the pain, all the death, for nothing. Salvation had been around the corner, and with their bloodlust they had squandered it. Earth was mostly a graveyard, but for a single city in the German countryside, one of the only areas on Earth to be mostly spared the destruction. The city was unlike any city humanity had seen since ancient times. Built to be a part of the Earth, not to conquer it, the city was a sprawl of halfway underground huts, greenhouses, and parks. The name of the last Earth city was, in every surviving human language, Atonement. Approximately 75,000 humans remain there, toiling to repair damage and detoxify the atmosphere, water, and soil with the help of intergalactic relief organizations. The remainder of humanity had scattered across the stars, colonizing in small groups where they could find a niche. Humanity had never failed to find niches. Primary hub, Satina Station. The contract exchange, Niles Mithran, had been raised in one of those colonies, a mixed-species trade village on Eliad II. At Iyah, 17, he had taken to the stars and not looked back. Now 35, he had spent his life in the stars, trading and exploring. To most species, seeing a human was a sign of good fortune. Their rare physical traits and vanishingly small numbers, by galactic standards at any rate, already humanity numbered. Over 450,000 souls once more, made them the stuff of legends and murmurs. Niles had profited handsomely by this reputation. You there, Niles? Feels like I'm talking to myself here. Hell's sorry, Ren. Like you said, sleep probably isn't a bad call. I'm turning in the finished chit for the Janisol drop. About that. There's a note in the file that says you got into it with the dock supervisor. They want to dock you 10% for his medical bills. What, that jumped-up Trilician, one of his yard hands, just some kid, tripped and dropped one of the boxes. Nothing was even damaged. I think he was just embarrassed. But then the supervisor started wailing on him. I don't know if he thought it would impress me, but I'm not impressed by people who beat up kids. So I let him know how the kid felt. With your words? Does body language count? No, it does not. But I'll tell them we're willing to send another human to discuss it further. I'm guessing they'll drop the claim, rather, than deal with that. Ren winked. Niles grinned. Why are you so nice to me today? Ren made a face. You saying I'm not always nice? I am so very nice. Niles leaned in. No, really, why? Ren made contemplative eye contact for a moment and then deadpanned. I guess I am not impressed by people who beat up kids either. She winked, and the green in her eyes sparkled and deepened. Niles felt warmth in his chest, as grizzled as... He was after almost 2 decades spacing. The way Relena eyes changed color with their mood was spectacularly beautiful to him. The deep green and blue hues Ren cycled through suggested coy good nature, humor, and admiration, though Niles was not quite fluent enough to understand that. He loved the way it made him feel, like getting a glimpse at the nature of the Earth he had never seen as it was described in stories. For a man who had lived his life in the cold steel of ships and corridors, it was a connection to some part of him that only existed in ancestral memory. Ren made a few gestures on the data pad. Okay, we're transferring your fee. If I'm wrong about them covering the 10%, I'll just take it out of your next few so it doesn't hurt too bad. We have an interesting courier run to Lannick if you're interested. I think Czech has the, details. Want me to buzz you in? Niles grinned and nodded. That would be great. Thanks, Ren. Work was never hard to come by for a human, and working stopped Niles from thinking too much. As he began walking away from the desk toward Czech's office, the feeling in the back of Niles's head screamed once more, and he stopped, before stepping back to Ren. Hey, Ren? She looked up, startled, her eyes cycling from autumn leaves gold to deep green again. Yeah? What is it, Niles? Her eyes cycled between deep green and soft orange. Concern? Curiosity? He really needed to learn more about Relena Eyes. Do you think you could take the day off today? And go home? He asked hesitantly. Niles, I'm flattered you want to hang out with me all day, really. But I've got bills, too. No, he said. Not to socialize, I just... He paused, not knowing what to say. Ren raised her eyebrows, and her eyes began cycling through shades of sunset red and cloudless sky blue. She leaned forward and whispered, Niles, is this... you... No? Niles closed his eyes and nodded. Yes. I'm sorry if I'm wrong, but it's a gut feeling. Gut feelings. The human gut feeling was one of the core aspects of legends about humans. Impossible for science to measure, though theorists had tried to explain it away as pure evolutionary instinct, and others had tried to wave it away. As baseless folklore, the gut feeling had made its way into the galactic rumor sphere when a human engineer had triggered an evacuation at a power plant on Calliope for no reason he was able to articulate. Per SC safety regulations, the plant had to undergo a full 48-hour shutdown cycle and inspection. He had been terminated and his supervisors and co-workers had been furious. Until 6 hours into the shutdown cycle, the plant went critical and exploded with the force of a 10-kiloton nuclear bomb. However, thanks to the evacuation, no lives were lost. He had been rehired with a substantial raise, a promotion, and a deep public apology from the power company. Later inspections had discovered an out-of-timing plasma valve, but nothing clearly apparent in the plant's diagnostic feed had caught the problem. When interviewed about the incident, the engineer had shrugged and said, "The flow just didn't sound right. I don't know what else to say." Neither did anyone else. It seemed like nonsense, but to the families of the plant's 115 workers, engineer Stannis Mortensen, now senior engineer Stannis Mortensen, had, after a lifetime of quiet, awkward introversion, become a hero, adopted family member, and eventually a spouse and father. Another gut-feeling incident had been during one of the final standoffs with the Bryn. Humanity was fairly new on the galactic scene at the time, and one such human was serving as a custodian aboard the EOC Navy picket battleship Libertanus. The battered SC and Bryn fleets were facing off in a final showdown after weeks of running battles. The captain of the SC ship, a gruff Barden named Captain Calo Sal, had been working with his tactical officers on a plan for the imminent exchange, when out of nowhere an insistent human voice said, "Second from the left, hit it now, with whatever long-range stuff will reach. Trust me." Captain Calosal, who had never put much stock in rank due to the Barden Society's strong egalitarian principles, hushed his senior officers who attempted to remove the human from the bridge. "Why that one? That's one of their largest and strongest ships. Our weapons won't touch it from here." The human had shaken his head emphatically. "I know that normally, sir, but look at how they're putting it in the back and trying to protect it without being too obvious. Don't the Bryn always put the big nasty ones up front to sort of brag? Why are they hiding it? I think something is wrong with its defenses." His senior officers had audibly scoffed, but the captain had taken a long, slow glance at the human, the monitor, and back at the human, who said softly, "I'm right, sir. I don't know why. Gut feeling." Tactical. Prow Tachyon Lance overcharge spike and strike near the power core. Senior, the Tachyon Lance needs 10 minutes to charge, and we join battle in about 8. If we fire it now, we won't be able to when we're closer. Thank you, Commander. I know my ship. Proceed. Captain Calosal had watched the bright, angry scar of the Tachyon Lance stretch across the void between the two covering escorts, expecting it to be contemptuously batted away by the Bryn ship's reflector fields. His jaw had dropped as the Lance plunged deep into the heart of the Bryn ship, followed by a brilliant nova, the unmistakable signature of a critical quark core breach tearing the ship apart. The bridge crew all stared wordlessly at the custodian, who grinned again. "Man, I really never go wrong listening to my gut." Former custodian Jin Wei, now commander and XO aboard the SC Navy light cruiser Prowess, never stopped listening to his gut, and his crew and captain never stopped trusting him. Many times they saw his gut was, indeed, a star to guide them by. Ren stared long and hard at Niles, searching for something in his eyes. Before long, she nodded. "I'll tell them I need a personal day." Niles looked relieved. "And can you tell me where you live, just in case?" Something in the intensity of his gaze reminded Ren that humanity was one of the few species with a predatory background, and stopped her from making a smart comment in return. She simply answered, "Habitat Section 17L, Unit 516. Niles nodded and lost focus, clearly committing it to short-term memory. "Thank you, Ren. Stay home, don't leave." She nodded back. "Drop by again soon?" He smiled. "Try and stop me." Now fully alert, Niles had casually strolled back to his ship on the pretense of changing clothes to don his ablative underarmor, a lightweight garment only slightly heavier than a t-shirt, but with similar protective qualities to light combat armor. A relic from his former life he had been thankful to have on hand a time or two. During his return to the unjustified bravado, he had paused often to read and strike up conversations, using the opportunities for observation. He had already noted 2 SC guards near the threshold to the ship access corridor, with irregularly rapid patrol patterns who seemed far more keyed up than normal, a Caldori skimmer with no activity at all, despite being docked at a very expensive hourly trade umbilical, and a persistent flutter in the outer docking light system. He noted as well that the minor vagrant types the station, beggars, and petty thieves, normally omnipresent on the hub, had made themselves scarce. Individually, these signs could be explained away, but once pieced together, the alarm bells in his head were feeling more real. Now Niles strode the ring, the thought of his meeting with Czech abandoned for now. Speaking his concerns to Ren, paired with the observations he had made in outer docking, had rendered them tangible. He could practically feel them crawling on his neck. This was not a daydream or a flashback to the Handria catacombs. Only a few hours had passed since the CX, but it felt like he was in a different world now, with threats around every corner. As rare as humans now were in the galaxy, where most species numbered at least the double-digit billions, the primal, survival instincts present in all humans were sharper than ever. In some wordless core, deep in their bones and their most primitive brain matter, the remaining humans knew there weren't many left. It was commonly agreed among the surviving humans that the near-total annihilation of humanity had awoken something, at the base level of consciousness that humanity had not been fully aware of possessing during more peaceful times, an ability to read a situation so finely as to resemble premonition. The fight-or-flight instinct was now overpowering in its strength and the feats it permitted, and senses were as sharp as a shard of obsidian when danger lurked nearby. So it was that the ring which Palimbi had found so overwhelming was coldly sorted and categorized by Niles's brain as he strode at a calm pace, scanning for threats, weaknesses, weapons, positioning, and advantage. Unthreatening species, which was most of them to a fully alert human, were filtered out and disregarded. His ears were keen for background noises, eyes probing endlessly for breaks in pattern, the myriad species crowding the ring, most subconsciously, but a few wiser ones well aware of what they were doing, gave the human a wide berth. While Niles had made no threatening gesture and was doing his best to blend in, the vast majority of species hailed from prey or scavenger evolutionary tracks, and the stride of a predator with forward-facing eyes alert and prepared for combat was practically a neon sign screaming, "Danger." More certain than ever something was badly wrong in outer docking, despite the mostly undisturbed crowds of happy shoppers here in the ring, Niles neared his destination. It was time to go to Radio Shack, primary hub, Satina Station, Mercantile Ring Level 3B, rivets and stuff. Oi, Museti, are you listening? Palimbi, who had been studying the display of shipboard monitors and reading the backs of boxes for what felt like ages with a mounting sense of dread and uncertainty, nearly jumped out of his fur. I'm sorry, what? Whoa, relax, buddy. I was just asking if you need some help. The portly Nuvian shopkeeper resembled a particularly large earth otter. Nuvians were some of the most common shop owners and employees in galactic trade. The constant supply of shiny new merchandise fed their instinctive love of gathering and gifting trinkets, and their ability to clamber along handholds set in the walls and rooftops meant that every bit of space could be used to display merchandise for later retrieval, a key consideration on board a space station with its pricey rent. Oh, yes. Palimbi, after 27 years of doing nothing but taking orders, found even a basic request for service difficult to put together. I require a plasma flow panel for a Museti interface system. Oh, sure. Those things love to burn out and get hacked. Which Museti interface system are we talking? There's the standard Faron 2.0, we have plenty of those, or is it one of the newer Palsda next-gen interfaces? I think we just got those in. Great new UI. Probably not anything older than those two if it's a ship on the hub routes. Palimbi stared blankly. It's the one the Talanka has. It's green. The Nuvian wrinkled his brow in rushed irritation. Is that your ship? You work on it and you don't know the interface system? Stop wasting my time, won't you? Go ask someone else. I have a business to run. Palimbi momentarily abandoned, his hunched, obsequious posture feeling a brief flash of fire and snapping. They just tell me where to send the damn plasma. Systems details are Muse only. I can't tell you what I don't know. That sort of snarl would have earned him a thorough lashing from a Muse. He braced himself. The Nuvian seemed to consider this answer and change in demeanor, a mixture of anger and sorrow crossing his expression. Palimbi was unfamiliar with Nuvian expressions, and the species as a whole, but this reaction did not seem threatening. The Miuseti. Of course, the half-slavers. Rumba wanted to cuff himself on the back of the head. He did not know the Miuseti well, and had thus assumed this was one of the arrogant, sneering variety he was accustomed to serving. If he had paid better attention, he would have noted the nervous, defensive posture of this one was much more similar to the silent work gangs the arrogant Miuseti always had with them. One here on his own? Must be scared out of his wits. In a considerably gentler tone, Rumba placed a paw on Palimbi's bony shoulder. We'll figure it out together. The Talansa, you said? Let's go look it up. Would you like something to eat? Palimbi shook his head firmly, determined to maintain his discipline after the near miss with the mancha cart. I can't. I can only buy the screen. Rumba laughed. No charge, lad, just some kelp wraps I brought from home. I'll share. Palimbi tried to hide his emotions. Sharing was not, to put it lightly, a Miuseti value. Well, then thank you, yes. I think would like that a lot. What is kelp? Buddy, when my broodmate gets her hands on it, kelp is a work of art. Brace yourself. Hey, have you seen the new hollow visors they're putting out for the release of Void E? Haunters 4? I've got one. I'll show you, you'll love it. Rumba slid his ID card to a back room of the store, and the two walked in together. Primary hub. Satina Station. Mercantile Ring Niles checked over his shoulder as he entered the small, plain steel door of the merchant, one very little known and not listed on the ring's map. This merchant was only accessible to humans, with locations in almost every trade area in the known galaxy. It was called Radio Shack. Niles had never understood the name. Radio technology was so primitive as to be practically unused in modern society. He had been told it was a reference to some old human shop, outdated and obsolete even before WW3. A joke. Not much point to a joke nobody gets, Niles had thought a few times, but the shop seemed stubbornly attached to the name. The Mao Radio Shack on Satina Station was located in the back of a ramen shop. Humanity's affinity for snacking was well known in the galaxy. Most species took 1 or 2 meals a day, or lightly snacked throughout. No other species shared humanity's love of both regular meals and snacks. Human in and around restaurants were expected everywhere, and therefore close to invisible. Most Radio Shacks were hidden in or near food establishments for this reason. A cool female computer voice stated, DNA sequence running, please limit movement. I like when you talk like that, Niles teased. A gravely menacing male computer voice stated, for the last time, don't sexualize me, Niles, I don't have a sex. Fair enough. DNA sequencing complete, said the voice, now a comic lilting Irish. Now hat can I do ye for me, boyo? Okay, point taken, stop that. All right then, the voice said, cool and female once more. Access granted. Niles stepped in front of a well-lit glass counter and just enough room to stand. Situation report and request, please. Suspected. Terrorism or seeding operation, primary hub Satina Station. The voice was quiet for a moment. No reports our end. Verify. Mithrin, Niles, Major, Terran EF, retired, 114 Zulu 9 Wumftour. Authentication phrase, Calypso. Non-duress phrase confirmed. Explain. Electrical issues, altered guard patrol patterns, unattended skimmer and outer docking, high traffic berth 3. Another being, even another human, might have pushed back or asked for more information. The unshackled AI did not insult his intelligence or waste his time. Confirm, countermeasures underway, tight beam underway. Requests, stealth counterinsurgency package with option for heavy package retrieval later. Confirmed. The Aishion 3D printer inside the counter began to whir. Standby for confirmation of tight beam, transmission failure, rerouting to secondary circuit, transmission failure, rerouting to tertiary circuit, transmission failure, interrogating station. Confirm transmission blockage. Transmission? Unsuccessful. Niall's stomach fell. He was later than he'd worried. Transmissions jammed? With the juice in your transmitter? The entire ring or just you? For how long? It's not going to be long before that's noticed. Blockage traceback confirmed 5 minutes, 10 seconds prior to when I initiated the tight beam attempt. And it's not just the ring, Niles. It's the entire hub. Primary hub, Satina Station, outer dock. Exterior Satina Station had not always enjoyed a stellar concordate fleet presence. For many years before growing into the hub and becoming a locus of galactic society and government, it had been an independent trade station. Being a source of lucrative goods, it had also been a frequent pirate target. When enough traders got tired of their goods being hijacked and their friends being killed by the raider gangs, they had bolted on the first weapon. It was simple, but nasty. A dual turbo bolter scavenged from a retired Relina garden ship. The next pirate raid, expecting easy pickings, had not even raised its shields. 2 massive holes through their cruiser had put a permanent end to the career of Redora Redcrest, feared pirate captain. The raiders, not inclined to take the sitting down, had stepped up their raids on the station, and so the arms race had continued, as many in history. Eventually, as Satina Station had grown massive enough and its weapons spread with it, it became too intimidating a target for even the most optimistic pirate gang. The weapons had been maintained out of a mixture of practicality and tradition, despite the SC fleet rendering them practically vestigial. In space combat, a gun that could move usually beat a gun that could not, in a fair fight. Presuming the fight is fair. Given the growth of the station and the eclectic mix of species involved in its expansion, the weapon count of Satina Station now stood at 36 turbo bolters in single, twin, and quad arrangements, 8 tachyon lances, 2 heavy and 6 medium, 30 meson pulse lasers, 4 swarm missile launchers, and 2 ultra-heavy torpedo tubes. It was dreadnought-scale weaponry, not used for anything but firing drills and so long that it was practically forgotten. As a device in Outer Docking Maintenance Corridor OD-17B began to extend its electric tendrils, the turrets and batteries began to exhibit scattered electronic gremlins. Screens fuzzed, servos hitched. Stellar concordate guards assigned to the station's defense array shrugged, grumbled, smacked panels, and went back to their more diverting cards, books, and gossip. 3 systems away, a trio of sleek, blacked-out starships lying cold in space flared to life and moved toward a slipstream entry point. Primary hub, Satina Station, Mercantile Ring Level 3B, rivets and stuff inside the backroom workshop of Rivets and Stuff, over kelp wraps and watching the trailer for Void Haunters 4, which for a moment scared him so badly as to forget his predicament, Palimbi made the first real friend of his life. Thanks for diving into this story with me. Don't miss out on the next one. Hit that subscribe button, give this video a big thumbs up, and drop a comment below with your thoughts. I'd love to hear what you think.